My son called another woman Mom, and I almost lost him because of my reaction. The first time my son called another woman Mom, he didn't even realize I heard him. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in the parking lot outside his elementary school. I'd arrived early for pickup because my last client canceled. And for once, I was actually on time instead of rushing in with cold coffee and guilt trailing behind me. I remember sitting there watching kids spill through the double doors and colorful backpacks while parents waved from their cars. Then I saw Ethan. My 8-year-old had always walked like he was in the middle of some important mission. Head slightly down, backpack bouncing, shoelaces untied no matter how many times I fixed. He spotted someone ahead of him and suddenly smiled so wide his entire face changed. Then he ran straight past my car, straight toward Melanie, and before I could even process the weird sting of surprise, he threw his arms around her waist and shouted, "Mom, guess what I got on my science project?" I swear the entire world went silent for one horrifying second. Melanie froze. I froze. Ethan froze the moment he realized what he'd said, even from 20 feet away. I saw the panic crawl up his little face. Then he looked toward my car, toward me. That expression still sits in my chest months later. Not fear exactly, but confusion. Like he suddenly realized he'd broken something he couldn't fix. I didn't cry. Not there. Not immediately. I just sat frozen behind the steering wheel, gripping my coffee so tightly the lid cracked. Melanie crouched beside him quickly, whispering something I couldn't hear. Ethan nodded fast without looking at me again. Then she walked him toward my car. I rolled down the window before they reached me because suddenly breathing felt difficult. "Hey," Melanie said softly. I hated how careful her voice sounded. Like I was unstable glass. Ethan climbed into the back seat without speaking. Melanie stood there awkwardly in her expensive cream sweater and yoga leggings, looking painfully beautiful in the effortless way divorced women apparently are supposed to hate. For the record, I tried not to hate her. I really did. Because technically, Melanie hadn't done anything wrong. That was the worst part. She met my ex-husband Daniel almost a year after our divorce. No affair, no scandal. No dramatic betrayal. Our marriage had already collapsed slowly and quietly under the weight of exhaustion, resentment, and years of pretending we were still happy. Daniel and I had been college sweethearts, married at 26, parents by 30, and divorced by 38. People always expect some explosive reason for divorce, cheating, addiction, abuse. Sometimes a marriage just dies slowly, like a plant both people forget to water. By the end, Daniel and I barely spoke unless it was about bills or Ethan's school schedule. We moved around each other like co-workers trapped on an endless overnight shift. When he finally asked for a divorce, I remember feeling devastated and relieved at the exact same time, which sounds awful until you've lived it. The divorce itself stayed mostly civil. We shared custody, split holidays, forced polite smiles through parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties. Then Melanie appeared 6 months later, young enough to make me self-conscious, but old enough to feel intentional about it. She was 32, a pediatric physical therapist, calm, pretty, patient, the kind of woman who remembered snack day and packed organic apple slices. Meanwhile, I was barely surviving. I worked as a real estate agent, which meant evenings, weekends, unpredictable hours, and constant stress. Some days I felt like my entire life existed inside my car between phone calls and showing appointments. Daniel, meanwhile, suddenly became father of the year after our divorce. Funny how that works. When we were married, I carried almost everything. Doctor appointments, homework, school emails, birthday gifts, soccer registration. After the divorce, Daniel discovered emotional availability, and Melanie helped. At first, I told myself I was grateful Ethan had another adult who loved him. That's what mature mothers are supposed to say, right? But gratitude becomes complicated when your child starts comparing you to the woman who lives in a calm house with homemade pancakes and two-parent stability, especially when you're the exhausted mother forgetting library day. Melanie helps me study spelling words better. Melanie makes real breakfasts. Melanie says yelling doesn't solve problems. That last one had cut deep because yes, sometimes I yelled, not abusive, screaming, just overwhelmed single mother. Frustration after repeating the same thing 12 times while answering work calls and trying to pay bills and keep groceries in the fridge. I was tired all the time, and Ethan noticed. Kids always notice. The drive home after the parking lot incident was painfully quiet. Ethan stared out the window, clutching his backpack. I kept waiting for him to explain himself. He didn't. Finally, I asked carefully, "Do you want to talk about what happened?" His face immediately turned red. I didn't mean to. The shame in his voice hurt more than the word itself. "You don't have to feel bad," I said automatically. But that was a lie, because I did want him to feel bad. At least a little. What kind of mother admits that? Ethan swallowed hard. I just got excited. I nodded while staring at the road. That makes sense. But inside, something ugly had already started growing. The rest of the evening felt strange, like there was invisible glass between us. At bedtime, Ethan hugged me extra tightly. "I love you, Mom." I almost broke right there. Instead, I kissed his forehead and said, "I love you too, buddy." Then after he fell asleep, I sat alone in my kitchen drinking wine I didn't even want and replaying that moment over and over again. Mom, not Mel, not Miss Melanie. Mom. I kept imagining all the little moments I wasn't there for anymore. Movie. Nights at Daniel's house. Saturday breakfasts. Inside jokes. New. Routines. Another woman learning my son. The next morning, my younger sister Ava called before work. "You sound terrible," she said immediately. "Thanks. No, seriously. What happened?" I told her. There was a pause. Then she sighed carefully. "Claire, he's 8. I know he's 8. He probably slipped. slipped. He's never slipped before. Ava hesitated, which irritated me instantly. What? I'm just saying, kids don't usually call someone mom unless they feel emotionally safe with them. The comment hit like a slap. So now I'm emotionally unsafe? That's not what I said, but I barely heard the rest of the conversation after that, because once insecurity gets inside your head, everything starts sounding like confirmation. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I probably should have ignored. Ethan mentioning Melanie constantly. Little habits he picked up from their house. The way he defended her anytime I sounded even slightly annoyed. And worst of all, Daniel looked happy again. Actually happy. Not performative social media. Happy. Real happy. Relaxed. Lighter. Meanwhile, I felt like I was slowly being replaced in my own son's emotional world. Then came the school art project, and that was the moment everything truly started falling apart. The school art show happened 3 weeks later on a rainy Tuesday. Evening in November, I almost missed it. One of my clients backed out of a closing at the last second, which turned into 2 hours of phone calls, paperwork, and me sitting in my car trying not to scream into the steering wheel. By the time I reached Ethan's school, parents were already wandering through the hallways holding paper coffee cups and smiling at construction paper masterpieces taped to walls. I arrived flustered, damp from the rain and carrying the familiar guilt that had started following me everywhere. Ethan spotted me first. Mom! The relief in his voice made my chest loosen instantly. For one beautiful second, everything felt normal again. Then I saw Daniel and Melanie standing beside his classroom door. Of course they were already there. Melanie waved warmly. Daniel smiled, the careful smile divorced people learn to wear in public. You made it, he said. I hated that sentence more than I should have. Like people were constantly surprised I showed up at all. Traffic? I muttered. Melanie handed Ethan a napkin because he had chocolate frosting on his mouth. Such a tiny thing. Such a harmless thing. Still, I felt irrationally irritated watching her wipe my child's face. Inside the classroom, colorful drawings covered every wall. Self-portraits, family trees, handwritten paragraphs about gratitude before Thanksgiving break. Parents crowded around snapping photos while kids dragged them from project to project. Ethan practically vibrated with excitement. Mine's over here. He grabbed my hand first. Mine. I held onto that tiny detail desperately. Then he pulled all three of us toward the back wall where his artwork hung beneath a sign that read, "My family, my safe place." The assignment was simple. Draw your family and write about the people who make you feel loved. I smiled automatically at first. Then, I actually looked at the drawing. There were 4 people. Ethan, Daniel, Melanie, and me, but Melanie stood directly beside Ethan, holding his hand. I stood farther away near the edge of the page beside a badly drawn golden retriever that looked nothing like our actual dog. My stomach dropped so suddenly I thought I might actually faint. Daniel must have noticed because his smile faded immediately. Claire. Then I saw the paragraph underneath. My family is special because I have 2 homes where people love me. My dad teaches me baseball, and my mom Melanie helps me when I feel nervous at night. My other mom works very hard and buys me cool stuff even when she's tired. My other mom. I couldn't breathe properly for a second. Not because Ethan meant harm. That was the awful part. The innocence made it hurt worse. Daniel stepped closer quietly. Hey buddy, why don't you go show us your clay volcano? Ethan happily ran toward another table without noticing the complete destruction happening inside me. I stared at the paper while noise blurred around us. Other mom, like I'd become a distant relative in my own child's life. Claire, Daniel said carefully. I'm sure he didn't mean, did you know about this? No, I turned toward Melanie. And you? She looked genuinely uncomfortable. No, but there was pity in her eyes. And I hated pity more than anger. I think maybe you're overthinking the wording, Daniel said quietly. I laughed once. Overthinking? Ethan loves you. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The question landed harder than he intended, because honestly, I didn't fully know anymore. I just knew I felt replaceable, invisible, like the version of motherhood. I fought for every single day somehow mattered less because I was stressed and imperfect while Melanie had the emotional energy to bake Halloween cupcakes. I need some air, I muttered. I walked out before either of them could stop me. The rain had gotten heavier outside. Parents hurried through the parking lot under umbrellas while I stood beneath the covered entrance trying not to cry in front of strangers. A few minutes later, Melanie stepped outside alone. I almost walked away immediately, but she spoke first. He talks about you constantly. I folded my arms tightly. Please don't. I'm serious. I looked away. He adores you, Claire. Then why does he keep calling you mom? The question finally came out sharper than I intended. Melanie's face softened immediately, and somehow that made me angrier. I never asked him to, but you didn't stop him. Her expression shifted slightly then. Not defensive? Careful. You know what I think? She asked quietly. I didn't answer. I think Ethan's trying to make sense of 2 worlds that feel separate to him. That sounds like therapist language. A small, sad smile crossed her face. Occupational hazard. Rain hammered the pavement around us. Finally, she said, kids don't divide love the way adults do. Easy for her to say. She wasn't the biological mother watching another woman slide into family photos. He's lucky, she added softly. Most kids with divorced parents don't get this many people trying to love them. Something ugly twisted inside me again, because I knew she meant well, and somehow that made everything worse. Back inside, Ethan excitedly showed me his volcano experiment like nothing had happened. I smiled when appropriate. Took photos, complimented his work, but emotionally, I felt disconnected the rest of the night. At one point, Ethan naturally reached for Melanie's hand while talking. The sight burned itself into my brain. Later that evening, after Ethan went to Daniel's house for their custody week, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. There was already a photo uploaded from the art show. Daniel smiling beside Ethan, Melanie kneeling next to him. Caption, "So proud of this sweet kid." Hundreds of likes, comments about what a beautiful family they were. I stared at the word family until my eyes blurred. Then I closed the app and poured another glass of wine. By midnight, anger had replaced sadness. Not rational anger. The dangerous kind built from insecurity and exhaustion. I started replaying every moment from the past year differently. Every school pickup Melanie attended. Every lunch she packed. Every calm parent moment where I'd been working. I suddenly felt like I'd been slowly erased while trying to survive. Around 1 in the morning, I texted Daniel, "We need boundaries." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. About what? About Melanie. Several minutes passed before he replied. "Claire, don't do this. Too late." I typed for almost 20 minutes straight. About Ethan calling her mom. About the drawing. About confusion. About emotional boundaries. About how inappropriate it was becoming. Finally, Daniel responded, "You're making this about your feelings instead of Ethan's." That sentence detonated something inside me because maybe he was right, but I didn't want him to be right. The argument escalated fast after that. Years of buried resentment spilled out sideways. Through text messages, "You were never around. I was working for this family. You always chose work. You checked out long before the divorce. You replaced me in under a year. That last one stayed unread for nearly 10 minutes. Then, nobody replaced you, Claire." But it didn't feel true. The next morning, I woke up ashamed. Not because I was hurt, but because deep down, I knew my anger wasn't really about Melanie. It was about guilt, the kind divorced mothers carry quietly. Guilt for missing moments. Guilt for being overwhelmed. Guilt for secretly wondering if your child feels calmer without you around. Still, shame didn't stop the jealousy. And jealousy is dangerous when mixed with fear, especially fear of losing your place in your child's heart. A week later, Ethan asked me a question during dinner that changed everything. "Mom? Yeah? Would you get mad if Melanie came to my soccer tournament next month?" I looked up slowly, and before I answered, I already knew I was about to make the situation much worse. I remember exactly how long I stayed quiet after Ethan asked that question. Too long. Long enough for him to notice. Long enough for the air at the dinner table to change shape. I mean, he added quickly, pushing peas around his plate. "Dad said she might come. If it's okay." That last part mattered. If it's okay. Like permission was something I could still fully control. I forced my voice to stay normal. "Why wouldn't it be okay?" Ethan shrugged, but he was watching me closely now. "I just didn't know if you'd feel weird about it." Weird. That word made something tight twist in my chest. Because weird wasn't the right word for what I felt, but I didn't have a better one that wouldn't scare him. "I'm fine with it," I said. It came out faster than I intended. Too fast. Ethan nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully believe me. Kids have a way of reading tone more than words. He went back to eating, but the conversation didn't really end. It just sank under the surface of everything else. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about soccer fields and folding chairs and the kind of parent coordination I used to imagine would be simple when I was younger. Back then, I thought divorce meant clear lines. This is my time. That is yours. Simple math. But there is nothing simple about sharing a child's emotional world, especially when someone else becomes part of it. The next Saturday, I drove Ethan to his soccer practice early. The field was still wet from last night's rain, and parents were already gathering, with coffee cups and folding chairs like they were preparing for war. Daniel and Melanie arrived, together 10 minutes later. Seeing them like that still unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Not because it was wrong, because it was becoming normal. Melanie waved at Ethan first. He waved back instantly. Then he ran toward her to show her his new cleats. I watched it happen from a distance, pretending I was busy adjusting his water bottle. Daniel stood beside me for a moment. "She's just coming to watch," he said quietly. I didn't say anything. "You didn't have to." I looked at him then. "Do you think I'm difficult?" He hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words ever could. "I think you're adjusting," he said carefully. "That's a nice way to say it, Claire." But I didn't want to hear whatever came next, so I walked away before he could finish. The practice itself was fine, normal. Kids chasing a ball, coaches yelling encouragement, parents cheering at the wrong times, but I couldn't focus. Every time I looked up, I saw Ethan alternating between Daniel and Melanie for reactions. When he scored a goal during scrimmage, he ran first toward Melanie, not me. It wasn't intentional, it was instinct. And instinct is what hurt the most. After practice, I made myself go over and act normal. I smiled, took photos, asked about his game. Melanie complimented him, then added, "You're really improving." Ethan glowed. I hated how much that mattered to him. On the drive home, he wouldn't stop talking about how she noticed his positioning on the field. She said, "I'm good at reading passes." "That's great," I said. And she said if I keep practicing, I could try out for the advanced team next season. "That's great," I repeated, but my voice didn't sound like me anymore. A few days later, things escalated in a way I didn't expect. Ethan came home from Daniel's house quieter than usual. He dropped his backpack by the door and went straight to his room. No hello, no excitement, no running to tell me about his day. I followed him. "Hey," I said softly from the doorway. "Everything okay?" He nodded, but didn't look up from his toy car. Did something happen? Another nod, this time smaller. I sat on the edge of his bed. "You can tell me." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his face made my stomach drop. Not sadness, not anger, confusion. "Mom," he said carefully, like he was testing the word. "Am I allowed to call Melanie Mom or not?" There it was, the question I had been circling without ever saying out loud. My throat tightened tightened immediately. Why would you ask that? Dad said it's okay if it feels natural. I felt something sharp rise inside me, but I don't want you to feel like you have to. Choose, he added quickly. Choose, that word did it. Because suddenly I realized what this had become for him. Not love, not comfort, but balance. Like, he was constantly measuring emotional safety. Between two households, I kept my voice steady with effort. You don't have to call anyone anything you don't want to. He nodded slowly, then asked the question that really broke me. But what if it hurts someone's feelings? I almost said something calm and mature, almost. Instead, what came out was quieter and more honest than I intended. It hurts me. Ethan froze. I immediately regretted it, because his eyes filled with panic again. I'm sorry, he whispered. No, I said quickly, pulling him into a hug. You didn't do anything wrong, but the damage was already done. That night, I called Daniel. I need to talk to you, I said. His voice was tired. It's late, Claire. This can't keep happening. Silence. Then, what exactly is happening? I took a breath. Ethan is confused. He's not confused. He's adapting. That's the same thing from where I'm standing. Another pause. Then Daniel said something I wasn't ready for. Melanie didn't ask for this role. He started calling her mom on his own. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. So you just let it happen? He feels safe with her. That sentence landed wrong in my chest, like a verdict. I didn't respond immediately, so he continued. And honestly, Claire, he feels safe with you too. Just differently. Differently isn't comforting. It's reality. We stayed on the line without speaking for a few seconds. Then I said it. The thing I had been swallowing for weeks. I feel like I'm losing him. Daniel's voice softened slightly. You're not losing him, but I didn't believe him. Not anymore. After that call, something in me shifted. Not outwardly, inwardly. I started paying attention to everything. Texting more often when Ethan was with Daniel. Asking more questions. Checking tone. Reading into pauses. Every interaction started feeling like evidence in a case I was slowly losing. Then came the moment I crossed a line I didn't realize I was approaching. Ethan's school sent home a permission slip for a Mother's Day breakfast event, 2 tickets per child. 1 for mother or guardian. Ethan came home excited. Can you come? Dad said maybe Melanie can come too. I stared at the paper for a long time. Too long again. Then I said, why would she come to Mother's Day breakfast? He blinked. Because she helps me sometimes. That word again. Helps. Not replaces, not chooses, just helps. But my brain wasn't in a place to hear nuance anymore. I'll talk to your dad, I said. Ethan nodded, but his excitement had already faded slightly. That night, I sent Daniel another message. She should not attend Mother's Day breakfast. His reply came almost instantly. She is his guardian on those days. That word again, guardian. I felt something inside me snap tighter. She is not his. Mother. 3 dots appeared for a long time before he responded. No, 1 is replacing you, Claire. Stop making it a competition. But it already felt like one. And worse, I was starting to feel like I was losing it. The next morning, I made a decision that I didn't fully think through. I called the school, and what I said would change everything that came after. I didn't sleep much the night before I called the school. When you lie awake long enough, your thoughts stop sounding like thoughts and start sounding like instructions. Everything becomes urgent. Everything feels justified. By morning, I was exhausted in a way coffee couldn't fix. I told myself I was just clarifying policy. That's what I said out loud when I dialed the front office. A calm voice answered. Hi, this is Claire Hartman. I'm Ethan Miller's mother. I wanted to confirm the guest list for the Mother's Day breakfast event. The receptionist was polite. Of course, let me check his file. A short pause. Then, it shows 2 approved guardians. My stomach tightened. Who are they listed as? Daniel Miller and Melanie Carter. There it was. Not a mistake. Not confusion. Official. I remember gripping the phone a little harder. Is there any way to limit it to biological parents only? Another pause, slightly longer this time. We generally follow custody agreements on file. You'd need to discuss changes with both parents. Right, I said quickly. Thank you. I hung up before I said anything else. For a moment, I just stood in my kitchen holding the phone like it had burned me. Then the anger came. Not loud, controlled, cold. That kind of anger feels organized, like it finally has direction. That afternoon, I went to Ethan's school early under the excuse of dropping off forgotten paperwork. I didn't even fully believe myself, but I needed to see something in person. I parked across the street and watched parents come and go. Then I saw Melanie arrive. She wasn't doing anything dramatic, just carrying a small gift bag and wearing a soft blue sweater. She looked like exactly what she always looked like. Calm, present, safe. That word again. Safe. I stayed in the car until my hands stopped shaking. When I finally went inside, I asked to speak to the principal. I didn't plan exactly what I was going to say. I just knew I couldn't keep feeling like a guest in my own child's life. The secretary led me down a quiet hallway and asked me to wait. While I sat there, I saw a wall of photos from school events, field trips, holiday parties, classroom celebrations. Ethan was in several of them, smiling, sometimes next to me, sometimes next to Daniel, sometimes next to Melanie, always adjusted into whatever version of family was standing closest. That realization hurt in a different way, not betrayal, but fluidity, like I wasn't fixed in his world anymore. Just one version among several. The principal arrived, kind but cautious. Hi, Claire. What can I help you with? I chose my words carefully. I'm concerned about non-parents being listed as guardians for school school events. She nodded slowly. We only include individuals approved by both custodial parents unless there's a legal restriction. I understand, I said. But emotionally, it's becoming confusing for my son. Her expression softened slightly. Has something specific happened? That's where I made my mistake, because I didn't say, I feel hurt. I said, my son is calling his father's partner Mom. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she stayed professional. And this is distressing for you? Yes, I said immediately. It is. She paused for a moment before responding. Children in blended families sometimes use affectionate terms informally. Unless there's a custody order restricting parental labels, we don't intervene in those relationships. I felt my chest tighten. So there's nothing you can do? We can ensure clarity in school communications, she said carefully. But family relationships are outside our control. That sentence ended the conversation before it really began. Outside our control. That was the part I couldn't accept, because everything in my life felt like it was slipping outside my control. When I got home, Ethan was already there. Daniel had dropped him off early. He was sitting on the couch watching TV, swinging his legs. He looked happy, too happy, like none of this had touched him yet. Hey, I said softly. Hi, Mom. Something in me softened at that. At least I still had that, right? I sat beside him. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you feel confused about me and Melanie? He frowned slightly. Confused how? Like who your mom is? He blinked slowly, like he didn't understand why this mattered. You're my mom, he said simply. A pause. Then, Melanie is like my other mom. There it was again. Not replacing, not choosing, just adding. But my brain couldn't accept adding anymore. It only heard splitting. That night, I called Daniel again. I went to the school, I said. Silence, then, why? I wanted them to understand how this is affecting him. His voice changed immediately. Claire, you did what? I just talked to them. You tried to involve the school in our custody dynamic without discussing it with me. I'm his mother, and I'm his father. That doesn't give either of us the right to override the other. I closed my eyes. This is not about you. It is when you escalate things like this, that word again, escalate, like I was the problem in motion. I'm trying to protect my place in his life, I said quietly. There was a long pause. Then Daniel said something I didn't expect. You already have a place. You just don't feel secure in it. That hit harder than anything else so far, because it was almost gentle, almost true, but not comforting. I think you need to step back a little, he added. My chest tightened. Step back? For Ethan's sake. Something in me snapped at that. You don't get to tell me to step back from my own son, Claire. But I had already hung up. The next day, I got a call from the school, not the receptionist, the principal again. This time her voice was more formal. Claire, I wanted to follow up on your concerns. My stomach dropped slightly. Yes? We want to maintain a supportive environment for Ethan. However, we also need to ensure both households are respected according to custody agreements. Of course. There is one more thing. I waited. We understand you may be feeling overwhelmed. If needed, we can recommend family counseling resources to help support transitions in blended family structures. My face burned immediately. I'm not overwhelmed. A pause. Then, I understand. I just wanted to offer support. After the call ended, I sat in my kitchen for a long time without moving. That's when it hit me fully. I hadn't just expressed concern. I had inserted myself into a system that wasn't asking for my permission. And worse, I had made it about control. Not Ethan. Not his feelings. Control. That realization should have stopped me. It didn't. Because later that evening, something happened that pushed everything past the point of repair. Ethan came home from Daniel's house holding a folded flyer from school. He looked unsure. Mom? Yeah? He hesitated. Can I ask you something without you getting mad? That sentence alone made my stomach drop. Of course, I said carefully. He unfolded the paper. It says I can invite both my moms to the class presentation next week. He looked up at me, then quietly added, is that okay? And in that moment, I didn't answer like a mother trying to protect peace. I answered like someone who felt she was being erased. I should have said something simple. Yes, of course. I'll be there. That would have been enough for Ethan, but I didn't say it fast enough. The silence stretched just a few seconds too long. Ethan noticed. His grip on the flyer tightened slightly. Mom? That pulled me back, but not fully. I was still stuck inside my own head. Inside every moment that had led to this conversation. Two moms, a school invitation, a system that already seemed to have decided where everyone fit except me. Why does the school need both of you there? I asked before I could stop myself. Ethan blinked. It's just a presentation. We show our projects. I know what it is, I said. Sharper than I intended. His face changed immediately. Not scared. Smaller. Like he was folding inward. I just thought it would be fun, he said quietly. Something inside me cracked at that tone, but I was already too far into it emotionally to step back. Cleanly. Do you think it's confusing for people? I asked. For who? For you. That question landed wrong. I saw it in his expression. He shook his head slowly. No. A pause. Then he added carefully, it's not confusing for me. That should have been the end of it. But my brain latched onto something else. If it wasn't confusing for him, then why did it feel like it was destroying me? I took the flyer from his hand and read it again. Bring your family to celebrate student work. Family. That word again. Ethan watched me while I read it, waiting. Kids do that when they sense emotional weather changing. They wait for storms they can't predict. Finally, I said, I'll be there. His shoulders relaxed immediately. And Melanie? He asked softly. The question felt heavier than it should have. I forced my voice steady. If she's invited, I can't stop her. Ethan nodded, but something in his relief felt cautious now, like he was learning how to read me. That night, I didn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't just jealousy or fear. It was something worse. Awareness. The kind that doesn't feel good or bad. Just irreversible. I started replaying every moment from the last few weeks differently. Not as emotional experiences, but as patterns. School conversations. Custody language. The way Daniel spoke. The way Ethan adapted. The way Melanie stayed calm through everything. And the way I didn't. I wasn't losing my son in a single moment. I was losing ground in small, unnoticed steps. And I had been responding to each one like it was an emergency. The next day, I tried to fix my tone. I made breakfast. Packed Ethan's lunch carefully. Asked about his day without pushing too hard. He seemed more relaxed again, which made me hopeful in a fragile way. Until the afternoon. That's when Daniel called. "Did you talk to Ethan about the presentation again?" He asked immediately. I paused. "Yes, why?" "He said you seemed upset about Melanie coming." I didn't say that. A long silence, then, "He's anxious." Claire, that word again. Anxious. Like I was something inside him that needed management. "He's fine," I said quickly. "No," Daniel replied. "He's trying to keep everyone happy at the same time." "That's not fine." I felt my chest tighten. "So now I'm the reason he's stressed?" I didn't say that, but that's what you mean. Another pause. Then Daniel said something that finally shifted everything. "I think we need to bring someone else into this conversation." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "A counselor. For Ethan. And for us. If needed." That landed differently than I expected. Not insulting. Final. Like a decision already moving forward without me. "I don't need a counselor involved in how I parent my child." I said, "This isn't about judging you. It feels like it is." "Then we already have a problem." I didn't respond because I could feel something closing around the situation, not resolving, containing. The next few days were quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt monitored. Ethan was more careful around, less spontaneous, still affectionate, still sweet, but like he was checking emotional responses before speaking. It broke my heart in a way I didn't know how to say out loud. On Friday evening, I got an email, subject line, "Family support recommendation," from the school counselor. They were recommending a co-parenting and child adjustment session before the presentation next week. Optional, they said, but strongly encouraged. That word. Again, encouraged, not forced, but clearly not avoidable. Read it 3 times. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and realized something uncomfortable. This was no longer just about Melanie or Daniel or even Ethan calling. Someone else, Mom. This was about how I was reacting to losing control over a situation I believed I should still be leading. And I had started trying to fix that feeling by tightening my grip and not realizing I was making everything worse. The session was scheduled for Monday. I told myself I would go in calm, reasonable, mature, the pie kind of mother who is misunderstood but cooperative. That version of me lasted about 10 minutes into the meeting. Daniel was already there when I arrived, so was Melanie, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't fully allowed myself to acknowledge before. She looked nervous, not guilty, not defensive, just careful, like someone walking into a room where they knew they were not fully wanted, but still had to be there because a child was involved. The counselor greeted us warmly and invited us to sit on. Ethan wasn't there. This was just adults, which somehow made it harder. The counselor began gently. "We're here to talk about how Ethan is experiencing support across both households." I nodded quickly. That's exactly my concern. Daniel glanced at me but didn't interrupt. Melanie stayed quiet. The counselor continued. "We've noticed Ethan is using multiple parental labels. We want to make sure that feels stable for him." "Exactly," I said. Then I added, "He's being allowed to blur roles in a way that's confusing." That's when Melanie finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "I don't think Ethan feels confused," she said carefully. "I think he's trying to express attachment in the only way he knows." "How?" I turned toward her immediately. "That's easy to say when you're not the one being replaced." The room went still. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Clear?" But I didn't stop. "You don't get to step into my child's life and redefine roles just because it feels natural to you." Melanie didn't react defensively. That somehow made me angrier. "I'm not trying to replace you," she said quietly, but my voice came out sharper than I intended. "Then stop letting him call you." "Mom." Silence again. Heavy this time. The counselor finally stepped in gently. "Maybe we can slow down and focus on Ethan's emotional experience rather than labels." But I was already past that point because I realized something sitting there that I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just about what Ethan was calling her. It was about what I feared he was feeling and what I feared I was losing. And that fear had started making me act in ways I didn't fully recognize anymore. The session ended shortly after. Not resolved, just paused. When I walked out, Daniel followed me into the hallway. "Claire," he said quietly. I didn't stop. He caught up beside me. "You need to breathe for a second." "I am breathing." "No," he said gently. "You're reacting." That word again. Reacting. Like I was something unstable in motion. I finally stopped walking. "You think I'm the problem?" I said. He shook his head slightly. "I think you're scared." That was the first time he said it that way. Not judgment, just observation. And it hit harder than anything else, so far because he wasn't wrong. But admitting it didn't fix anything. It just made everything clearer. And clarity at that moment felt worse than confusion. The presentation was 2 days away, and I had no idea anymore how to show up for it without making things worse. The morning of the presentation, I woke up before my alarm. Not because I was rested, because I wasn't really sleeping anymore. I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, staring at the coffee machine like it might give me instructions for how to fix what I had already started breaking. Ethan's permission slip was still on the counter, folded neatly, smoothed out to too many times. At some point during the night, I had written and rewritten what I might say to him that morning. Every version sounded wrong, too cold, too emotional, too late. He came out of his room rubbing his eyes, hair messy, backpack already packed like he had been preparing himself since the day before. Morning, he said. Hey, I replied softly. Big day. He nodded, then hesitated. Are you coming? That question should not have hurt the way it did, but it did, because it wasn't asking for permission anymore. It was checking certainty. Yes, I said immediately. Of course I'm coming. A small pause. Then he nodded again, like he was confirming something in his own mind. The school auditorium was already filling when we arrived. Parents, siblings, teachers, the usual noise of folding chairs and camera flashes and nervous kids adjusting their shirts. I saw Daniel and Melanie near the front row. They weren't sitting too close to each other, not performing anything, just existing in the same space comfortably, which somehow made it worse for me. Ethan spotted them before me. He hesitated for half a second, then walked toward all three of us together. Like he had practiced this exact moment in his head. He stopped in front of us, looked at me, then Daniel, then Melanie. Hi, he said. Hey, buddy, Daniel replied. Melanie smiled softly. Hi, Ethan. I waited for him to choose where to stand. He didn't choose. He just stood in the middle for a second, shifting his weight, then quietly said, I'm a little nervous. I stepped forward instantly. It's okay. You're going to do great, Daniel added. You've got this. Melanie nodded. Just have fun with it. Ethan looked at all of us again, then gave a small smile and walked onto the stage with his class. That was the moment I realized something simple and painful. He didn't belong to any one of us in that moment. Not fully. Not the way I kept trying to make it. The presentation started. Kids went up one by one, showing projects, talking about families, interests, dreams. Ethan's turn came halfway through. He walked up carefully, holding a small poster board. My chest tightened immediately. He looked out at the crowd, found us, all three of us, and began. My project is about space, he said. A few laughs from the audience. Cute kid confidence. He talked about planets, rockets, stars, but I barely heard any of it. I was watching his face, the way he paused, slightly when he glanced at me, the way he steadied himself when he looked at Daniel, the way his eyes lingered just a little longer on Melanie. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. I learned that families can look different, he said into the microphone, but still feel like home. The room stayed quiet in that warm, listening way adults do when children say something meaningful. He continued. I have my mom, he said, looking at me. My heart lifted slightly. And my dad, he added, turning to Daniel. Another pause. Then he looked at Melanie. And I have Melanie, not mom, not replacement, just her name, but his voice softened when he said it. And they all help me in different ways. He smiled a little, then added, sometimes I used to feel weird about that, but now I don't. He looked down at his shoes for a second, then back up. I just think I'm lucky. Silence, then applause. Polite at first, then warmer. I clapped too, but my hands didn't feel connected to my body because I understood something in that moment that I hadn't fully accepted before. This wasn't a story about replacement. It was a story about adaptation, and I had been treating adaptation like betrayal. After the presentation, parents moved around taking photos and congratulating kids. Ethan ran toward us afterward, visibly relieved. He hugged Daniel first, then me, then hesitated, looked at Melanie, and hugged her too. Short, simple, natural. I felt something twist inside me, but this time, I didn't react outwardly. That was new. We stood there for a moment in the noise of the room. Then Daniel said, proud of you. Ethan smiled. I was super nervous. You didn't show it, Melanie said. He laughed a little. I was pretending. That made him laugh more. Then he looked at me, and I braced myself, but he just said, did you like it? A simple question, not loaded, not defensive, just wanting connection. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. And this time, I meant it. Later, when things were winding down, Daniel asked if I wanted to grab a coffee nearby so we could all head out together. Normally, I would have said no. Normally, I would have created distance, but Ethan was still holding on to all of us in different small ways, like he wasn't ready for separation yet, so I said yes. We ended up sitting at a small cafe near the school. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't tense, it was just awkwardly normal. Ethan talked about his project again. Melanie asked him questions. Daniel teased him gently. I watched all of it quietly. At one point, Ethan leaned slightly toward Melanie while explaining something about his model rocket. Then he leaned back toward me when asking about next weekend plans, then turned toward Daniel about soccer practice. No one pulled him, no one competed. He just moved naturally between us. And I realized something I hadn't understood before. I had been trying to define my place in his life by narrowing everyone else's, but Ethan didn't experience love as a limited resource. He experienced it as a network. After we left the cafe, Daniel walked ahead with Ethan to the car. Melanie stayed back for a second beside me. We didn't speak immediately. Then she said, he's doing okay. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Yeah, a pause. Then I surprised myself by adding, I think I've been reacting more than I should. She looked at me carefully, not judging, not relieved, just listening. I don't think that makes you a bad mother, she said. I let out a small breath I didn't realize I was holding. I think I was scared, I admitted. That makes sense, she replied simply. We stood there for a moment longer. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'm not trying to take your place. Claire, I looked at her, and this time, I believed her, because I was finally seeing what I hadn't been able to before. She wasn't competing. She was just present in a different way. When I got home that night, Ethan was already asleep. I stood in his doorway for a long time, watching him breathe, thinking about Everything I had almost turned into something unfixable, and I realized something important. Hadn't lost him, but I had come very close to pushing myself out of his life emotionally by trying to control how he experienced love. The next morning, I wrote a note and left it on his desk before work. It wasn't long, just simple. I love you. You don't have to choose. I'm learning too. And for the first time in a long time, I meant that part fully. Not as reassurance for him, but as a correction for myself. Sometimes being a parent isn't about holding tighter. It's about learning when not to.